Hello, everyone. I am Christine Gritman, and this is, of course, Let's Talk About Brand. I do the show every week except last week, because last week was Black Friday, day after Thanksgiving in the United States. I'm in the United States. Love you guys, but sorry, had to take the day. But most weeks, I am here on Fridays at 12 noon Eastern Time, or whatever time it is right now where you are, talking to guest experts about specific elements of branding. For those who don't already know, I also have a Twitter chat on Tuesdays, also at 12 noon Eastern Time, that is also about branding. That is #ChatAboutBrand. And every Tuesday's chat on Twitter is on the same topic as I interview my guest expert about on this Friday show. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. This show is currently live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And also let us know if you are joining us live or on the replay. And if you're joining us live, I want to hear from you. Seriously, ask questions, give comments, be a part of this show. We are so happy to have you here. Speaking of people I'm happy to have here, I am happy to have Mr. Kennyatta Collins. So he has a lot of multi-hyphenates going on. He is multi-skilled, he is multi-passionate, he is multi-experienced. But the things that we're going to be focusing on today is that he is a branding strategist and a photographer. So we're going to talk about branding and photography. He has walked the talk both from the branding end and from the photography end, and of course from mixing it all together. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring Kennyatta on. Hello there. Yay!
Hey, what's up?
I used to have a sound effect for applause, and I'm missing my sound. So I just got to do it myself. I just got to give all the love, but hopefully our viewers at home are going to give us some love too. We got Dewey at least. Hey, Dewey, how you doing?
Hey,
So you see, we're
Dewey.
international already. Dewey's in Wales.
That's amazing.
Good evening,
Oh,
Dewey.
that's so dope.
Yeah, so I came to know you through Twitter, through marketing Twitter, really. Again, you have a lot of different experiences under your belt, but let us know. Tell us just a little bit, kind of the TLDR of your experience, where you come from, and how you come to this world where you encompass both strategic brand knowledge and amazing photography.
Honestly, it really started with, I would say, going to school. I went to school for international marketing. But while I was in school, I started to, hands who were just extremely creative. My friend Anissa, she was a photographer at the time. Two friends of mine, they were fashion designers, and just being inside of that mix, inside of that collective of people, it consistently expanded my horizon to see that there's more to me than just looking at strategy and how to put things together. So I ended up leaving school a bit early. Sorry, mom. And trying my hand at different creative endeavors while also freelancing and working with, different startup companies. So everything went hand to hand. So photography came in very quickly. And from, the onset of that, moving from Atlanta to LA to Houston and then now Miami, I got an opportunity to learn a lot, experience a lot, and work for a lot of different individuals and brands. So it cemented the both sides of the categories for me.
Love that. So I want to get into, of course, the meat of the discussion, which is brand photography. You have worked in a few different industries with photography, including high fashion photography, all of that. So I'd love to hear from you about the part that branding plays, because you are unique. Some photographers do not have brand strategy experience. They're kind of used
100%.
to the aesthetics of it, and they may not understand the brand strategy behind it. So I would love to hear from you, sort of how that works for some photographers and how it works for you, because you bring extra to the table.
So what I learned, I think really, really early on was the being able to define the purpose behind the image, right? So it's very easy for somebody to say, hey, I want to communicate and tell a story, right, with my brand. However, the problem is that's very generic, that's very basic. And then when you start digging into, okay, well, what kind of story do you want to tell? That then starts to determine, okay, what kind of lighting do we use for this photo shoot? What does the styling look like? What models are chosen? What arenas or actions are we going to have them do versus not do? All of the different intricacies behind the story, and then the use cases for the photographs then begin to dictate how the creative direction goes. And I think the most successful photographers have an eye for that, or have at least an understanding for it, where they're able to talk and communicate with the creative direction team, and they're able to talk and communicate with the brands or the clients to be able to get that information to better direct them. And I think that's always an opportunity zone for photographers today and a lot of creative people today to dive into, is having a better understanding of the why, the what, the how, going into the overall campaign or project, versus just looking at it from an instance of creating art or creating something beautiful.
Now, I'm sure that, as I mentioned before, some photographers are all about the aesthetics. I'm sure some brand managers appreciate that you bring strategic understanding to the table.
Hmm.
Have you ever had a situation where a brand manager has not appreciated that and has been like, look, do what we tell you to do? Like, stop having opinions. You know
Of
what I
course,
mean? I mean,
it
I've worked
comes
with marketers and creatives.
it, it comes with the territory, just being honest, right? It comes with the territory. But I think you just learn that there are some people who I think maybe a little bit more traditional in their approach to things. And so, being that way, they're a lot less flexible and a lot less willing to expand and grow. And in those scenarios, shout out to today being a day and age where people can, really chart their own path. You get to kind of maneuver away from people like that and steer closer to, the people who will let you express yourself, and all your many many gifts and talents.
To that end, you are a photographer and you can shoot, just your own stuff or whatever to show what your
Hmm.
aesthetic is. But when you're shooting for a brand, you of
Hmm.
course have to keep their branding and their aesthetic in mind. And how do you marry that? How do you ensure that your own what you bring to the table and what's going to reflect well on you and what you can
Hmm.
stand by as an artist is also going to fit with the brand needs of your client?
I think the first part, at least for me in my journey, one of the beginning parts was getting to really sit down and understand what is it that I'm looking to communicate as a photographer and as an artist. I think sometimes we get so caught up in, the surface level of things, like, hey, I want something that's going to grasp attention. I want something that's going to tell a story. But once again, what does that actually mean? How does that actually look? What is the point of it all? So once I was able to figure that out, I would pursue people who I felt resonated with that. So I haven't come across too many moments where that marriage wasn't a good one, but in the times that I did, I just had to challenge myself to find ways to inject my own DNA. And it's not the easiest thing in the world, but you with experience you learn to push the envelope and just add like that little touch, and even at the end fight for what's important to you, a part of your creation. I think creatives and photographers specifically today, um, have to use their voice and have to use their platforms to be able to stand up for the work that they create, right? We're just as much a part of the process and the finished process of the brand as the creative direction that went into it in the first place.
Absolutely. There has to be a reason they're hiring you. You have to bring something to the
Mm-hmm.
table. You're not a tripod. You know, you are an artist
100%.
yourself. Um, so what are some things that I mean at this point I'm sure it's natural to you, but if you could try to backtrack and parse out what are some elements you make sure to have conversations about, give thought to when you're on a shoot to make sure that it is fitting that brand.
So first and foremost, right out the gate, I always ask, how are the photos going to be used? The how is really important, right? Because depending on the medium, it helps me to understand, what kind of shots are necessary. So even if, let's say, for modeling agency, and they're saying that, hey, these photos are going to be used to build the book, well, I ask questions about, okay, well, is this going to be a completely new book? Is this going to be a book refresh? Are you looking to do something different with the model? What do you need to do with the model moving forward? What brand clients have you already booked for them? I get all that detail first. So then it gives me, a better roadmap as to, how to go ahead and create the shoot. Um, if it's a branded client like a fashion brand or an apparel brand, I make sure and ask, okay, well, what's the creative direction for the quarter? What's the creative direction that you're looking into for the campaigns that you're going to be releasing, leading up to this or after this, right? To make sure that whatever it is that the team and I do, it follows in line with what the overall brand strategy looks like. And so being able to keep those two things in mind, I think competitive advantage for me because the client then sees that I understand it from their perspective. And so it makes it easier to keep the lines of communication open.
You bring up an excellent point about the fashion industry, which is that it is constantly changing. It is about newness, it is about creative direction for this current collection.
Mm-hmm.
And they have this sort of interesting balance of it has to feel like the brand. There's a reason this fashion house and this fashion house and this apparel line and this apparel line are different. They have their own sense of branding, but there's also sort of thematic elements for the collection. How does that this isn't specifically brand photography, but it's an interesting branding challenge. How have you seen that as someone who is such a part of creating those branded images and the entire image that people have of these very visual collections? How do you balance on brand for the house in general with the freshness and the newness of what they're doing now? Does that make sense? Is that too convoluted?
It does. It does. No, and I think what we see and I think sometimes the best way to describe it is point to, the success stories, right? So you look at a brand like Gucci, you look at a brand like Yves Saint Laurent as well. They do a brilliant job of keeping their theme and keeping the overall DNA and integrity of the fashion house while still finding ways to inject nuance into the way that they tell their story because they understand very clearly that the brand story itself is not what's changing. What's just changing is the language used to communicate that to the new audiences. And so I believe what you're looking at in terms of how to balance the two is keeping that mindset. Like my goal is not necessarily to tell a different story, but to acknowledge the fact that the audience I'm speaking to may have a different language. And so my job now as the photographer or the creative director or the person who's, coming up with this branded image, my job is to a learn the language first and then b being able to translate that back from the team and then to the creative and then making sure that it matches one to one or as close as possible to the way that the audience understands things.
Now, I asked you about fashion because I know that you've done a lot of work in fashion. You've given a lot of thought to branding and creative in fashion. Now, going more to something that a lot of my audience can relate to a little bit better, how do some of these lessons about how bigger brands like that and lifestyle brands like that brand themselves, how can we apply that to something where it's a personal brand, where it's like literally me or literally
Hmm.
you? How can you apply some of those lessons that you get from bigger, loftier, more aspirational brands that we can apply to the way we present ourselves as individual proprietors?
Oh, I'm the king of keep it simple. When I tell you keep it I mean that's my mantra, right? Like the brand slogan for me in the building is do the work and tell the story. Because it keeps it simple. What am I here for? I'm here to do the work. I'm here to tell your story. When you're looking at your personal brand and you're building your personal brand, you want to keep it as simple as possible, but also as authentic as possible, right? So what you're looking at is okay, if you know that your interests are focused on, let's say, for me, it's coffee. I love coffee. I love coffee so much. It's like, okay, cool. Well, I know that I love coffee. I know I'm most comfortable in coffee shops. Okay, well, when I'm looking to do, media photo shoots or content shoots around myself, I'm like, cool, we're going to a coffee shop. And what starts to happen is that as I authentically create the content and create the branding around myself, the audience that I'm looking to attract is going to find me as well. So other people who love coffee or other people who love the coffee shop in the area, they're gonna really reach out. They're gonna engage. They're gonna find ways to commute, especially if there's a way that something I said or did resonated with them as well. I think sometimes we run into the habit of overcomplicating it because we look at the data so much. So we're like, okay, well, I need to be posting around this time. I need to be, hashtagging like this. I need to do all these different things that we start to force ourselves into these carbon copy molds. When if you're looking to do a personal brand, everything has to be unique. Everything has to stand out. It has to feel like you. So the foundation always needs to begin with the basics of being yourself. And then looking at the way you like to communicate that and finding the platforms, avenues, and resources that allow you to do that on a consistent way and in a really high quality way.
And I love that you used coffee as an example because I want to point out a few things. First of all, that is something that's fairly universal. A lot of people love coffee. Just like with me, a lot of people use Red, Coca-Cola, Virgin, Target. I didn't invent Red. You didn't invent coffee. But the fact is we can own it because A, it's something we're doing in real life anyway, right? It doesn't require that much maintenance to get you into a coffee shop or to get me into Red.
100%.
But also you mentioned resonance, and I like that because that's something people can resonate with too. They can see something. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to invent the things that are a part of our brand. We just need to own them. My friend Vanessa has a question, and I want to remind everybody, please ask us your questions. We are here for you live. If you're watching it live, if you're not, ask questions in the comments. I go back and check the comments, so bring it on. So Vanessa is in real estate, and she said, we're looking at finding a style of photography which stands out among the crowd. Of course, everyone sees the generic shot of, the front of the property or whatever. So she's wondering if you can suggest some sort of direction to share with the photographer to get them a little beyond the generic.
Okay, so not even trying to be funny, but when I was in LA, I came up with this because I was about to get into real estate photography and I saw what they were asking for me and I was like, nah, I can't do this. This is way too carbon copy. So I actually have an answer for you. One of the best ways I think to liven up, especially when you're talking about real estate photography, is to add the lifestyle element to it. People need to be able to see themselves in those settings. So it's not just about having the different pillows and accessories, but making it look lived in, making it look like something that they themselves can imagine themselves in that very moment when they see the photography. So if I'm trying to describe let's say the beauty of the room, right, of the master bedroom, how expansive it is and things of that nature, making sure to communicate with the photographer the family that you envision living in this space, what you envision them doing in that space, giving them the storyline behind what they're trying to capture. So it gives them more room to play with in terms of communicating that to the audience versus just giving them things like square footage. And hey, we want to just sell the room based on, the high ceiling, etc. It's like, no, give them a story to work with, because as you give them a story, they'll be able to get it in different angles that'll more than likely be able to communicate that better, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And I work with a lot of realtors, and the number one thing I say to them is start with what's interesting, especially since I know I'm not the only person who sits there when they're not looking to move, when they're not looking to buy or sell, and kind of flips through these listings and dreams. And I know some people who wound up buying houses when they weren't intending to, just because they put themselves in there. I mean, that's certainly it's a dreamy place. But I love what you said about that, about what is the story you're telling, the lifestyle story people can put themselves into, because that's what people really need. One of the questions that came up on our chat is Jeremy and Abby wanted to know what's like some of the favorite clients that you've worked for and why. You don't have to get specific about the brands if you don't want to, but what have been some of the most interesting things that you've worked on as a photographer with brand?
So automatically right out the gate, number one, it's been select model management. That was the very first modeling agency that in Los Angeles gave me my shot. So I give Select all of the credit in the world. Tahira has been, the agent that I've dealt with since then, since 2018, and just seeing the way that she cares so passionately, not just about the models that she represents, but also the creative process, the photographer being able to coach me on different details. It was just a truly beautiful and organic growth relationship. So I can't thank Select enough for that. And hmm, you know what? Honestly, there's also Natasha. Natasha, she's at this point a travel blogger, but Natasha was also one of the very first people that took a chance on me. That was the very first fashion gig I've ever had, and that was in Atlanta. And I
Nice.
was shooting for Jeffrey Kalinsky's fashion show. And she brought me in as her personal photographer. And the lessons that I've learned working with Natasha are still foundational to everything that I do to this day. So I would say those two people and that they're a part of, bar none.
What are some of the lessons that you learned on that gig with Natasha that you still
First and
use?
foremost, that everybody is a person. I remember I had to take pictures of some people that I never in my mind thought that I would be meeting at that stage of my life. And it was just like, the 8 Mile song, like my palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. Like I didn't even know how to ask people to take their photo. Mind you, I'm in an event where everybody wanted their photo taken. But it was a very good learning lesson for me. Um, Another thing was Gail O'Neill. Natasha introduced me to supermodel Gail O'Neill, and Gail, she helped me to remember that as the photographer, I set the tone emotionally, and physically on set. So if I'm freaking out, if I'm panicking, if I'm looking like I'm not sure about the photo, it translates and it ripples effects to everybody else who's on set. So it's helped me to also be a good manager of myself. Even if I may not be sure of something, I never let that out, and I'll never let that shown, because I want to make sure that the subject specifically is as comfortable as possible. And if things do have to be discussed, I want it to feel like a collaborative atmosphere and a collaborative space, as opposed to just being like a situation where it's like, hey, let's all panic together and think it's doom and gloom.
Well, I certainly hope Mom's spaghetti didn't wind up factoring into that.
Not at all.
Good, good, good. So Dewey, we got a lot of really active Welsh people in here. I'm loving it because Vanessa's also from Wales. So although she lives right here. So Dewey would love to know, what is your top power tip for any amateur who wants to take brand photos besides hire a photographer?
Get to know your phone. And I can't, and just people laugh at it, but our iPhones, our cell phones do way more than we give credit for. I've done videos through my iPhone, high quality 4K videos through my iPhone. I've created business cards through my iPhone, websites through my iPhone. You'd be shocked just how much you're able to do and create with the tools that you just have at your disposal. It's all about learning your tools. So take time out to go outside and play with the different portrait mode settings. Play with different exposure settings. Figure out what 4K looks like on your phone when you film it in one direction or when you film it under a different lighting style. Have fun with it in those aspects, because as you do, what then starts to happen is that you'll be more confident, and you'll also realize the different details that goes into capturing some like and some of the images that other people like as well. But I'll definitely always recommend starting with your phone, because our phones today can do a lot.
And I'll point out, I think Dewey's on an Android. So you said iPhone. iPhones are amazing, Dewey. Just saying. All right. So my final question that I just want to get in there. You are a contributor for Adweek. So you have seen amazing, high quality creative from big agencies, big brands, consumer brands, not just apparel and fashion. So, what are some of the common themes you've noticed for what tends to make an impact in terms of brand creative?
Ooh, that was a good one. I think right out the gate, what I would say is when the story that's being told is given room to actually be told through the person to tell it, it always comes out beautifully. I'm reminded easily of the photographer Joshua Kisei and the way that Brent able to trust him in the way that he directs a shoot or in the way that he even directs a commercial. I think it speaks volumes because you can see the detail, the level of detail placed to the subject, the level of detail placed to the culture, the level of detail placed on even the styling elements. Like nothing is overlooked and it feels so brand itself. And I think the ones that win and the ones that succeed greatly, they embrace that. I think even to not even to put it back on fashion, but I even think to Burberry and their commercials, especially the ones around the holiday time, like they tell a story of magic and they tell a story of family and togetherness, especially around the holidays. And you get so caught up in the emotions of it that you completely forget that they're trying to sell you a $6,000 trench coat. Like,
Yes.
and you're just like, oh, yes, I love this. And you want to see it all the time, completely not focusing on the product. But I think that's successful because what they're tying into is relationships that you have even outside of their scope and their field. And that's a beautiful thing.
And the fact is they're iconic. So even
A
if you
hundred
can't
percent.
afford to be a part of that story, you can still live vicariously.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a beautiful thing. All right. So, Kenyatta, tell people where they can and should find you and why, of course. Got to hit that
I
why.
like
Why
the
do people
why. I
find you
like the
and where?
why. So everything social media wise, it's Kenyatta. Twitter is my go-to right now. So follow me on Twitter at it's Kenyatta. You can check out more of my work as a photographer on Instagram at it's Kenyatta. And my website, kenyatas.co. Remember, guys, I like it simple. So just use my name for everything. Um, and what I'm working on right now is Web3. I'm working on Web3 and I'm working on new ways of adapting blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and NFTs to my own protocols as a creative and as a brand strategist. Something I think is important moving forward is not just showing different content creators and people building personal brands what these things mean, but how to actually implement them and put them a part of their processes so that they're able to reap benefits more organically.
Love that. And that is one of the things that I will tell everyone. One of the best reasons to follow Kenyatta is not just for the photography. It's the fact that you're always thinking, always learning, and always sharing that journey. So thank you so much for being on. As I mentioned before the show, hang out for a minute so that we can talk after.
Got you.
But thank you, Kenyatta. And for the rest of you, just a reminder that I do this show, Let's Talk About Brand, every single Friday at 12 noon Eastern Time on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And there is a Twitter chat on Tuesdays at noon Eastern. So next Tuesday, our chat topic is going to be branding with humor. Some people get it right, some people get it very wrong. And one of those people who gets it right is going to be with us next Friday. That is Adrian Molina. If you have ever seen and enjoyed any work from Aviation Gin, which is Ryan Reynolds' gin brand, you'll know that humor is a massive part of that brand. And you know what? Ryan's not writing the tweets. That is all Adrian. So we are going to be talking without Adrian on Tuesday on Twitter about the things that a brand should consider when considering humor, what does work, what doesn't work. And then on Friday, we're going to be talking to Adrian about his own experience branding with humor. Please do join us for that. Thanks. Bye.